I can certainly attempt to tell you what this does. And that would make no difference though. Because if I attempt to tell you what this does, or any attempt to tell you what this does, would be what it is. Story. With a capital S. It's just amazing. It's just incredible. I mean, even the word story is story. But it's the only thing that seems to be able to, I don't know, capture itself in a way. And it's not a trap. It's not a trap that everything that is story. It's just that it's self-referential. That's all. It refers back to itself constantly. Constantly referring back to itself. There is one thing I can tell you that it certainly does, and is when I listen to people with credentials now and people in power, is I see the story and I listen very carefully to what they say, and all I see is story. Terrifying story sometimes. Maybe because their story can be an influential one. Isn't that strange? If you listen, you ever watched movies like war movies and stuff like that? And people instruct people. They give them a set of instructions. In other words, orders. And they perform the act that the order gave them. No explanation, no chance of questioning it. It's just you're told to obey the order. And that works subconsciously. I'm sure that as a child I watched a lot of war movies. Even played and stuff and war games. I remember like when a house was built around our neighbourhood and we used to go in the trenches, in the footings, when they dug out the footings, and we called them the trenches, and we pretend to be shooting each other. And one would be a captain, take orders, or give orders, sorry. It's almost like from the moment we're born, we're instructed to obey. Story. It's like story is the leader. Story is the rule that we all must comply with. The ruler is story with a capital S. You can see that with kings and queens and whatever. What would they be without story? They talk about, I don't care because I don't read books much. I don't have a big vocabulary, but I think there's one about the emperor has no clothes. But the weirdest thing is, the emperor has no clothes is still emperor. See, subconsciously in the mind, it sees the story emperor like a story of leadership and honour and something to be worshipped or obeyed or whatever. And then the no clothes part is the comedy of it. But still in the back story, or even the front story actually, because it says emperor with no clothes, consciously it's still an emperor. So I think it's a story about people laughing at the emperor that has no clothes. But the emperor has the last laugh, doesn't it? Because you still have the story of Emperor. And what does that conjure up? It's like the rule there is still story with a capital S. And those 6 words keep on rebounding, don't they? Nothing can prove story doesn't exist. Because even the emperor or the story with no close is still nothing can prove the story doesn't exist. See, it wasn't a story about mocking anything else but the biggest story. And that story was the Emperor story, wasn't it? It was almost like story mocking itself, in a way. But like I said, the Emperor has the last laugh, because you still storied a naked person being an emperor. So simple. Because even the stripping down of all those glorious clothes or clothing, even the stripping down of those still left behind the only thing that nothing can prove doesn't exist. It left the story Emperor fully intact, unharmed, and you can't even strip that down to be naked. You can't even expose that and laugh at that story, can you? You can only laugh at the image of a human being with no clothes on. That's the trick. That's the game. That's the theatre that the Emperor can't be proven to not exist. The Emperor story can't be proven to not exist because nothing can prove Emperor story doesn't exist, with a little s. But the big story is the big S story. 6 words. Nothing can prove story doesn't exist. Let me just give you one final example. There's a person that has a name of Epstein, has the title Epstein, the words Epstein. Apparently, that person has passed away and is no longer with us. But the only thing that you can't prove doesn't exist and will always exist, and you can't escape, is story. So what rules do we obey? Or what is the ruler that is obeyed? There is only one rule. Nothing can prove story doesn't exist. 6 words is it. The Epstein has no clothes. The story has no clothes, but the story still doesn't need to be dressed up, does it? The image or the actual physical thing can completely disappear while leaving behind the only thing that can't disappear. You can't make it disappear, because it's like I keep saying, nothing can prove story doesn't exist. Nothing can make story not exist. So the emperor had no clothes is the emperor still had story. The emperor doesn't need clothing. Emperor only needs story with a capital S, because nothing can prove story doesn't exist. So in the case of Epstein, Epstein doesn't need to exist to have an Epstein story. Do you see it now? The only thing that exists story, and nothing can prove story doesn't exist. That's enough, isn't it? So it was never the case emperor has no story. It was emperor has no clothes. It was story has no clothes. But story doesn't need any clothing, because nothing can prove story doesn't exist.